Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far, and if you're not currently, you will be after this, because lots of things have happened today. Rumours everywhere. The OpTic Texas roster may well have just been revealed here. Also, Envoy to Toronto Ultra. What does that mean for their setup? What does it mean for FaZe? Who do they get if Drazah has chosen to go to OpTic instead? And also Thieves, where does this put them in all of this chaos going on? Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. So starting the day with this. Jacob L says 4 teams are going to finalise their rosters first. OpTic, FaZe, obviously. Then Ultra, very interesting. And then Boston. Boston Breach, to me, are one of the key teams to watch at the moment. Yes, it seems like everyone's rejecting them right now, and nobody really wants to play there with potentially better offers upcoming, but they are trying to build a solid squad. And let's not forget, last season, when the new Subliners team was formed, that ended up winning 3 events, including champs on the season, they were not considered by many, including admittedly myself, to be a top 4 team. I thought they would be top 6, top 7 with a lot of upside, but no one really had them competing for championships at the start of last season, certainly. And they came out of the blocks, they won the first event, and they went back to back at the end of the year. Incredible stuff. So not to say that just because OpTic, FaZe, Ultra potentially are forming super teams, that other teams can't potentially still win. They can, but there are some super teams being formed. And if this OpTic Texas team is true, and if this team doesn't win an event, I don't know what to say anymore. Now, just to quickly touch here on the Los Angeles Thieves, because they are obviously not mentioned here, and my understanding is it's tough right now if you're Thieves. Your players are getting poached left, right and centre. They're going to different organisations. From a budget perspective, they don't seemingly have enough money to really do what they want to do ideally in this transfer window. They are one of the teams, remarkable as it sounds, sitting back and waiting for the big boys to sign their players before Thieves can then decide what they want to do, which is not the position they want to be in. Can they form a team like last year's Subliners that are better than expected? I think they certainly can, but right now if you're a Thieves fan, you are struggling. As far as I'm concerned, they messed up last off-season by not re-signing any of these guys to new deals. Octane's retired, Envoy's gone, Drazah's gone, Kenny is probably going to stay, but that's a really tricky rebuild to do, especially when arguably the top 8 SMG talents in the game are going to be on the top 4 teams, and we'll get into that too in a second. So it pretty much begins here, and when I did the video earlier today talking about OpTic Pred, I had a feeling that OpTic Pred was going to be talked about a fair bit this evening, and we actually get this in the Intel OpTic accounts. Now, okay, the credibility of this is definitely in question, but he does tweet this out: Hazard, Predator in the area. Now, if you guys don't know, Drazah's gamer tag used to be Hazard back in the day, and then Drazah is Hazard backwards, if you guys can work that out from here. So if you guys weren't aware of that, that's what's going on. And he then replies and says, this tweet has all you need to know about OpTic. Martin says, if you're wrong, I will hunt you down. And he also says that if Drazah Pred is OpTic, then Sib to FaZe is the most likely possibility. And as he says in the replies, you have truly cooked. And this is where it gets really interesting to me. If this is true, that OpTic are getting Drazah and Pred, as I am pretty sure, I'm 90% sure that's what's going to happen at the moment, then FaZe can't get Drazah, and therefore they will need another option. Could it be Ghosty? Maybe, but it could well be Sib. We saw a lot of credit given to Sib from Crowder in a video that we did just last night on the matter, and it's pretty crazy to think that the possibility, right, that Drazah had offers from both FaZe and OpTic, and if he's chosen to go to OpTic, then that shows something about the pull that OpTic have in comparison to FaZe. Now, FaZe, obviously, you know, you want to go there to win, but nonetheless, Drazah maybe thought, well, you know, a bit of drama with those guys, and the OpTic offer is a pretty difficult one to turn down. And this from Shotzzy is crazy, and honestly, I'm recording this video now, there might be an announcement later this evening by one of these teams, and if it aligns with what's in this video, I'll probably just make an update on it tomorrow morning and leave this as is and do a pinned comment or whatever. But OpTic are clearly, I think they're preparing something, because Shotzzy put this out on his TikTok with some incredible acting. I mean, look at the eye pop he does right here, like, fantastic stuff. They've actually let Hicksy do some leaking. So he says that his friends, like, sent him a video. This guy gets into the car, and you guys can actually see the hazard lights on the car blinking, right? So people are like, oh, hazard, you know, and all this. And then the camera goes down, and people are like, oh, is this a Predator? Or even people were saying, is this like the Thunder from Down Under or something, right? Because the camera gets blown off. Like, I don't know. People were trying to read into to it, and maybe there'll be some explanation at some point. But this must have meant something, and shortly after this, we then get Ronnie that comes out with this. Sources say Pred and Drazah are the front runners to join OpTic Texas alongside Dashy and Shotzzy. The Dashy and Shotzzy thing was guaranteed. I think it's become increasingly clear over the last few days that Pred was going to be their SMG target. The question to me was, would they get Drazah, given the fact that the rumor was a few days ago now that FaZe's #1 choice was Drazah. But he was initially, before the whole FaZe rumors, linked to OpTic. It was meant to be Drazah and Envoy. Those were the initial discussions, and many people, including myself, were like, if you fumble the bag on Pred, especially because he's free, what are you playing at? And people can say whether Pred and Shotzzy or Envoy and Shotzzy are a better duo, but as far as I'm concerned, you stack the talent and you make them figure it out, because if these guys can't figure it out, I don't know what to say. The amount of talent here is immense, and if OpTic lock this in, they win the offseason as far as I'm concerned. Like, they've upgraded Huke for Pred, that's clear, and look, as much as people like Ghosty, Drazah is a really impressive player. Like, I've been impressed with him for a long time now. He's a world champion, he's a grinder as well, and he does get on with Dashy. We know that the Ghosty Dashy thing, at least to our understanding, wasn't really working out so well. Drazah and Dashy, they definitely get on. Like, these guys are boys, they get on with Pred as well. Those reasons are involved in part as to why this is happening. And then Jacob L says, as reported by Ronnie, I've been told that Pred is very likely headed to OpTic Texas. Drazah is expected, but not yet guaranteed. So possible that Drazah to FaZe could still happen or somewhere else, but the rumor has it at the moment that this is the most likely possibility. And I was 90% sure this was the case on what I'd heard before these tweets went out. And then after I saw the Envoy thing, then I'm like 95% sure. And maybe that's, that's the Ronnie number that he gave before when Hydra was meant to join OpTic and it was 95% confirmed and then it didn't happen. So it's not yet set in stone. I don't think the contracts have been signed, albeit there might be an announcement from OpTic later today. Who knows? Maybe it is set in stone. But if this is the OpTic roster, I just can't see how they could have done any better than this, realistically. Drazah and Dashy as an AR combo, Pred and Shotzzy on the SMGs. There's going to be questions about how well they're going to work together. But on paper, this is just absolutely outrageous. And if this team doesn't win something, I just simply don't understand what's wrong with OpTic at this point, because they have to, right? Also, another piece that people are talking about, maybe not quite as much as they should be, is that not just have you got incredible slaying, but the search and destroy on this team should be the best in the league, as far as I'm concerned. Pred and Shotzzy, not so much this year, but definitely in previous years, has been a first blood demon, and Pred was the absolute do-it-all for Surge in Search. He would get the first bloods, he would convert the man advantages, and then he would clutch up the rounds when necessary. Pred was a monster in Search last year for Surge. Pred and Shotzzy getting your opening kills, opening up the rounds, and Drazah and Dashy to close them out. Drazah's one of the best search and destroy players in the entire league, by the way, and then you got Dashy thrown on top for good measure. It's just outrageous how good this team should be, and if the Warlord has effectively, that's Shotzzy by the way, cooked up this roster, then he's done a cracking job, it's got to be said. And the idea that they've got Drazah and Pred, potentially both players that FaZe could have wanted, is pretty impressive for OpTic. If they were potentially looking at both of those guys, and they've chosen this OpTic situation over FaZe, that's definitely a vote of confidence in OpTic's direction. And the reason why I think this is even more likely is now we get this. So the only other question I had about this was that I still felt that this Envoy OpTic thing could happen. It was not yet completely out of the realms of possibility. I thought, could they get Pred and Envoy, like do some weird thing with a flex, like Shotzzy flexes or something? Maybe. But then we get the decision apparently has been made by Envoy that he wants to join Toronto. So not FaZe, not OpTic, but Toronto Envoy is going to be on the cards, and apparently he got offers, as we understand, from both Boston and Toronto, but he told Boston, no, I'm going to take the Toronto offer. And I imagine that he did this because Toronto might have got some money from somewhere, and whether the money things for them was never an issue in the first place, because when Toronto, we were hearing the rumors that they were in shambles, Scrappy wasn't happy, they were trying to sell off Insight and CleanX, right, to another organization, and then Thieves were probably thinking, all right, here we go, we can spend a bit of money, get those guys into our team, and build an actual solid squad from there. But if Toronto are keeping Insight and CleanX after all, and maybe the money issues were either fabricated or it was simply various decision makers within an organization having different ideas of what they were planning to do, they've made this call now to bring Envoy in, and Envoy's happy to join, which kind of makes me believe that they might be keeping the rest of their roster. And on paper, that's a disgusting team. Like, I rate Hicksy, but Envoy is clearly next level. And if they could get a team with Scrap, Envoy, Insight, CleanX, like, that's That's a really good team, right? And you're adding that onto the Subliners team that won the World Championship, this ridiculous on-paper OpTic team. FaZe are always going to be there. But then it raises the question, what do FaZe do? So we're not even discussing Thieves at the moment, and surely they're going to build a squad that's somewhat competitive. But FaZe might have to go for Simp now, because what other options are there? If Drazah goes to OpTic, and if Scrappy's stuck where he is, you know, Ghosty, I'm not sure that's going to happen personally. Sib is potentially the most likely candidate, unless something happens with the subliners. And this is actually not as outrageous as you think it is. Kismet is re-signing a deal, but I've heard that while it's very likely that subliners run it back next year, due to various contractual things and all the other chaos that's happening right now, it's actually not guaranteed that subliners have the same roster. And if one of those guys becomes available, then it really changes the discussion as to even what FaZe might decide to do if, let's say, a guy like Priester might be considering other opportunities. So that's one to keep your eyes on if you're subliners fans. I'm sure you're hoping for the team to stay together, and I think more than likely that is what's going to happen here. But, you know, you can never guarantee things in a market like this when it's got to be one of the craziest Rostermania periods that I have personally witnessed doing this for quite some time. And to add insult to injury to the Boston breach after getting rejected by Envoy, Ghosty has apparently turned them down as well. And why would Ghosty turn down Boston if they're building a good team if he's not getting an offer from, okay, let's say FaZe or, you know, potentially Minnesota Rokkr? Like, I'd like to see Ghosty and Slasher maybe as a duo make it work somewhere. I think that'd be interesting. But it's apparently not going to be Boston, and probably Boston are sitting here thinking, I thought this was pretty funny from CDL Valorant, you know, breaching free agency, who want me? And it ain't looking so good. So they've looked at guys, right? They tried to get Ghosty, they've tried to get Envoy, and apparently both of them have turned them down. Doesn't mean that Boston still can't make and field a competitive roster, because they are, as far as I'm concerned, the team to watch. But we also have to briefly speak on Thieves here, because they are in a tricky spot. It's crazy how we've looked at those teams, OpTic, FaZe, Subliners, Toronto, and yet we haven't really mentioned Thieves. We've mentioned Boston as likely going to be more competitive than Thieves this year, which is scary, and maybe they have to go through, like, you know, a low budget rebuild type period. Kenny, unknown, probably going to stay. Envoy to Toronto looks likely. Drazah to OpTic looks likely. Octane's out of there. If they do go down the route of Kenny +3, I really hope that they take a chance on some, like, SMGs with more upside, right? You know, an Afro, a Capstone or something like this. Like, I don't really want Thieves to run it back with, like, Donny, Temp, and TJ, and, like, bring in the old guard again. I mean, I don't think they really would do that and run back their Cold War roster, but I just think they've got to take a slightly different approach here if Thieves want to have more upside, because you look at the best SMGs in the game. The Tiny Terrors, that's 2. You've then got Envoy and CleanX, I think that's another 2. You've then got Hydra and Kismet, that's another 2, and then Shotzzy and Pred. Those are probably your top 8 SMGs in the entire game, and they are concentrated, as it stands with the rumours, on 4 teams. So it is going to be difficult, but not impossible, for another team to build a roster that can compete. But honestly, on paper, looking at that OpTic team, it's like, that team is very scary. And if OpTic have actually pulled this off, I think they've done a great job this Rostermania and have probably won it hands down. Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.